Hello, welcome to today's Face Reading Caricature. Today we're going to be doing Mark Zuckerberg. We all know who he is. He's a peculiar character and an interesting person to face read because he hasn't really got many facial markings. So it's really, you have to sort of focus on the relationship between his features, and he's got quite big expressive features for someone who doesn't seem to be particularly engaged with his emotions, and it kind of gives him this robotic kind of demeanour. I found this picture here. I don't know if I'm just imagining this, but this is when he was testifying before the US Senate Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation with regards to Facebook's role in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Basically, they were collecting as much data as possible and using it to influence elections, and we got a picture of him here. I think this was the second time most people had seen him in public, like actually talking, and the first time he looked very pale and very pallid, and this is kind of his second big public outing, and it was kind of like I just noticed that as I was watching the video, there's a sort of paleness around the eyes, almost as if he was wearing tanning goggles of some kind, and I tried to highlight it here in this. I don't know if you can kind of see it, but there's kind of a lightness around his eyes in this sort of area. So I don't know if his marketing people are trying to give him a more human kind of look to make him look better publicly. I don't know. Anyway, that's just speculation. This is the name of the video anyway if you want to see it. Whistleblower evidence leaves Mark Zuckerberg speechless at hearing. It's a nice video actually. It's a good video. It talks about how Facebook follows you around the internet. Once you're on Facebook, you might go into other websites and it's tracking you by a piece of software called Centra. So Facebook is always tracking you, or that is the allegation anyway. We can see a very oval kind of head, very narrow kind of oval head. Oval heads are generally people that are quite sociable. They may not be the most outgoing people, but they are very sociable, and they usually have quite a good social consciousness about them. And we know this kind of with Mark Zuckerberg. He's very broad-minded, and he gives a lot of his money away to charity. So that's kind of what that would imply. The narrow nose is a sign of physical weakness. He is kind of naturally, you can almost tell with his shoulder. I know he's sort of buffed up in recent years, but he's got very narrow shoulders as well. So we look at his public profile. We can actually see on the right hand side his public profile. If we compare it to his actual real face, there's not much difference between his real face, which is here, and his public face, which is here. So he's actually quite congruent in who he is. The distance between the eyes on the left hand side shows that there's a part of him that is probably a lot more creative or a lot more able to think outside of the box than perhaps he's been showing in his real life. From a young age he was very good with computers and programming, so it would make sense for him to sort of express more his analytical side, so we get the kind of more closer together eyes, sign of concentration. Whereas here on his left side it shows that there is potential for spiritual growth here. Part of his self-actualization might actually be becoming a more spiritual kind of person, and perhaps that's what his charity work's all about, kind of entering that side. Now he's succeeded in a sort of material realm, how can he succeed in the kind of more spiritual or the more, I don't know, even emotional realm? Because that's another thing with Mark Zuckerberg. Despite his age, he hasn't got much markings on his face. He doesn't have many lines. No, worry lines. There's no purpose lines. None of this. Even his bags are quite sort of, nondescript. This is a sign of someone, and you'd probably expect this with someone like Mark Zuckerberg, someone who's kind of not exactly an emotional person. He's not engaged emotionally. He's very much up here in the head, and we can see when you split the head up into three parts, you can see that his head, the logical area. This is the thinking area. This is the practical area. This is the practical sort of thinking, and this is more the emotional. And his thinking takes up most of the room in his life, and you sort of expect that from someone who kind of works in computers. You know, they're obviously going to be highly intelligent people. Another slight thing I've noticed is that his lip, on the public side, it sort of pops out a little bit more. It's like he's trying to show more emotions on this side, but he's not quite able to. So he's got a sort of slightly asymmetrical lip. So on his right side, there looks like a bit more shape to his lips, whereas the left side seems a bit tighter. It is believed that the higher and the broader the forehead, the less social conditioning someone went through as a child. So they were kind of given free rein by their parents. He was kind of encouraged from a young age to do what he wanted. From what I understand, his mum was a psychiatrist, his dad was a dentist, so he came from a sort of academic family. He would have been encouraged very much academically, and this is probably why the eyes here on the public side have come together. He was encouraged more to be a kind of analytical, intelligent, intellectual person, whereas the private side hints that maybe he wants to break out of that, or perhaps that's where his life is going. We don't know. He's got quite round eyes, so this is a sign of someone who is socially aware, even though he may not find it always easy to fit in social situations. Someone who can be very bold, but also has a kind of almost childlike exuberance about discovering new things in the world. They like to see new things and understand things in new ways. So there is, again, this sort of broad-mindedness, literally in his case, very broad mind, always looking for new ways of doing things, a kind of innovative sort of person. We see this also in his the shape of his nose, if I can find out. There we go. A very aquiline nose. These kind of noses of people that are independent, they're sort of the pioneers, they're the leaders. You know, this is like a leader's nose. Any nose that sort of sticks out about an inch from the face is considered large, and that's kind of a good sign. It kind of shows that you're a free thinker, you're a leader amongst men. And also I've noticed a little thing with his ear here. This little thinning of the cartilage here would indicate that around the age of 3 he might have had some kind of health problems, and I've looked online to try and find out a little bit about it, but there isn't really anything written much about his childhood, so that's just pure speculation. But generally speaking, the thinning of the cartilage around the top of the ear, if it's a man you're looking at the left ear, the left hand side, because that's the yang side, the masculine side, we can sort of see there's a real thinning here. So it could imply some sort of, I don't know if he had any problems in childhood or anything. If you're trying to read a woman's ear, you do it from the right hand side because you're reading the yin side, the feminine side. But we do know that his ears are wide at the top. Again, this is often a sign of people that become self-employed or they're very good at business. So a combination between this sort of aquiline nose and the wide ear is very good for business. It's not a surprise that he's as successful as he is. People with a lot of metal energy are quite introverted because they're very sensitive to their outer surroundings. So they often become quite reclusive as a way of sort of recharging before going out into the world. And this might even explain his kind of this weird choice. He's kind of famous for wearing these grey shirts all the time. He sort of adorns himself in colours that aren't too overstimulating. You know, he likes to keep things simple and basic. He doesn't like to be overstimulated. He likes to keep his mind focused. So let's see how this goes. Right, so I think that kind of does it. That's my attempt at Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, kind of an interesting kind of person to do. Like I said, there's not many facial markings, so it's all about the sort of the metal energy that kind of determines the placement of the features on the face. He's someone who has a lot of fire energy within him, and we know this because he's actually got quite a lot of freckles. You can't really see it in this picture, but there's certain photos he's got quite a lot of freckles, so there's a lot of fire energy, which is a kind of very emotional person, but he's also got the metal energy that kind of tempers that. Yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting, but it does seem there is I don't know, maybe a spiritual side trying to seep through. We'll see what happens with that. Only time will tell. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, like the video. If not, give it a dislike. If you want to see more of these things, subscribe. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
Try not to let stuff bother you as much as possible, but it is going to bother you because you're human, and I was human. I am human, still. But I was just referring to myself in the past. Not that I was not human.
Command system shut down.